Show this fool knight what it is to have no fear. Go to God! Oh, my leg! Oh, my leg!
Quiet.
The original Assassin's Creed game is a game that I didn't have any particularly fond memories of. Although, when it was first shown off, I was excited at the time. I remember watching Jade Raymond's commentary at various showcases over and over again. An open-world game set in a historical medieval setting? That's amazing. However, when I finally got around to playing it, it fell short for me. I didn't finish it at the time and didn't come back to it until years later. Welcome everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm taking a deep dive into the original Assassin's Creed as a sort of retrospective, but a review at the same time as to how it still holds up. Since the first game, the Assassin's Creed franchise has released several mainline games with a bunch of spin-offs. Obviously, in that time there have been changes to the formula and new additions, some of which haven't always gone over well with fans. With its long pedigree of games, I figured it was a good time to return to the series' roots and see whether or not it's worth playing. But first, let me continue my little story to give you some background about me and my history with the franchise. So first off, I'm definitely a big fan of Assassin's Creed, and have played almost all of the mainline games, from Assassin's Creed 1 all the way up to Assassin's Creed Origins. And I've played several spin-offs, even tried to play the platformers, but only ever finished AC China. I'm still working through Odyssey, and the only reason why I haven't played them all is because I play them in order, and Assassin's Creed games have become way too big for me to get through. I will, but it takes me a while. Ubisoft Montreal developed Assassin's Creed with, of course, Ubisoft acting as publisher, and released it in November 2007. It wasn't until the following year in April that the game was brought to a PC audience. The original game was something I did eventually play through in its entirety, as I said, but it was solely to play through it since it was the start of the series. The showcase and announcement of Assassin's Creed 3 reignited my interest in the franchise, and I decided I wanted to give it a chance, but I needed to start at the beginning, and I rushed through the first one. I did the bare minimum to complete the game so that I could move on to what was in my mind the better Assassin's Creed games. At the time, the combat felt laughable to me because it was trivialized with the counter kill, the intel gathering activities were repetitive, and I felt the parkour was clunky, especially when I would compare it to later AC titles. Ultimately, I never saw myself returning to the older games, and especially not the first one, an Assassin's Creed game I didn't really care for. Well, here I am, giving it another shot and trying to appreciate the game as it is, rather than any expectations I had of it at the time I first played, or comparing it to later titles unfairly. However, before you could even play Assassin's Creed, you'll need to do a few extra things to set it up besides just installing the game. If you're playing on PC, that is. First off, you'll probably experience a lot of stuttering in the game, and I guess this is because the game is trying to communicate with an Ubisoft online service that no longer exists. Here you could do one of two things. The easiest workaround is to shut your internet off and make sure the game can't even try to connect at all. But this is kind of annoying. Alternatively, you can add a simple line to a Windows file that will tell the game that it can't connect and to stop trying. I'll leave a link in the description if you need this solution. Furthermore, if you're like me, then you might be patting yourself on the back for solving that issue, only to run into another one. And basically, it's that the game won't work properly on modern systems. You'll need to set your graphics card settings to force Assassin's Creed to run at a max of 60 frames, otherwise you'll get weird things like dying in a leap of faith because the game didn't recognize you hit the hay bale. Or maybe it's trying to tell you that's not realistic. I don't know. Either way, make sure you keep these things in mind if you're looking to start a playthrough. Visually, Assassin's Creed holds up really well despite being a game that's over 15 years old. The excellent vistas from the viewpoints do a great job showcasing how the game can look, and I was happy to see that since viewpoints are one of my favorite things about Assassin's Creed games. That and the immediate jump right after. I felt the cities were distinct enough from one another with their own architecture and color palettes. However, I'd say that Assassin's Creed has a very washed out look, which is a big difference to later titles, which all seem to dial up that saturation. I'm not a fan of this toned out look, and admittedly, I didn't care for it when I first played the game. However, I can't deny that this is one of those things that does a lot to convey the right feeling for the game. Everything here feels dark, gritty, a bit oppressive, and I think the choice in the color design does a lot to accentuate these feelings. The size of the cities were large and felt city-like in nature, especially when I first played the game. I don't think I had seen anything quite like this before. I know Grand Theft Auto existed, but I had never played those games at that time. The only thing I played that had cities, if you could call them that, was Morrowind and Oblivion. And Assassin's Creed 1 far overshadowed those games, at least in population density and sheer size. The cities themselves are populated with a ton of people. Honestly, it's amazing to me just how many people can roam the streets in the three cities of Damascus, Acre, and Jerusalem. Yes, there's a lot of repeat character models, but it does so much to make the cities feel alive. Walking through markets, past places of worship, etc., and seeing all the people walking around makes it easier to imagine that these people have their own lives that they're living. Speaking of character models, the enemy designs were also well done. There was a lot of variety depending on where you were and who your target was. From a gameplay perspective, yes, many of them were the same, but it was just the colors or tabard they were wearing that was different. Some of them did have subtle changes with their armor, such as helmets or wearing chainmail rather than leather. Despite the subtleness of the look, it was fairly easy to pinpoint these enemies that would prove to be a bit more of a challenge, such as not going down on the first counter or being able to break your grab. The animations are really well designed in combat as well. Parkour animations are impressive, especially with the amount of different handholds and various objects that Altair can interact with. However, the combat animations, especially the counter kills, were the most memorable for me. Obviously, you'll see them again and again, but I always felt satisfied pulling off a counter kill, especially with the short blade, which I think had the most brutal animations. Outside of the graphics, I thought the music was really good. Many of the tracks are somber and have a dark feeling to them, even to the point of sounding slightly scary at times. I thought the music did a great job to complement the rest of the game. Assassin's Creed 1 can feel mysterious, tense, and as I said earlier, oppressive, and the music captures all this. Not to mention, it obviously pulls inspirations from Middle Eastern music and sounds to further complement the setting of the game as well. Also, the story is completely voiced here, and it's all well done. Out in the city, you'll hear the same lines again and again from the masses, and it can get annoying.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll find a way to repay this kindness, I swear.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll find a way to repay this kindness, I swear it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll find a way to repay this kindness, I swear it.
But that's a very small nitpick next to the excellent voice actors carrying different roles in the game. Although I'd say two things bothered me about them. First, while Altair, the main character, is voiced well, his voice clashes so much with the rest of the inhabitants around him since they all have obvious Middle Eastern accents, or French or English if Crusaders.
Supposedly his captives seemed grateful to the man. Not all of them, but enough to make me wonder. How did he manage to turn enemy into friend?
Leaders will always find ways to make others obey them, and that is what makes them leaders.
But Altair very obviously sounds American, and even Altair's face looks very much like Desmond. Personally, I think I would have rathered something that fit the setting better, but it's fine. The second thing is that there are no subtitles. Why? Well, actually, I suppose I could probably guess. Given how old the game is, accessibility settings probably weren't something thought about that much at the time. It's a pity though. I don't need them, but I always like turning them on so that I never miss anything that is said. Oh, and one last thing that is kinda just a nitpick, but it has to do with the cutscenes. In many of the cutscenes with the Animus, you'll see a little flicker signaling that you could click a button to change the camera perspective. I really dislike this. I would have rathered the cinematics to just be cinematic without the need for me to control the action.
Challenging my authority? Are you perhaps hoping to turn my own knights against me?
No. I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I've done nothing wrong.
I don't recall accusing you of any wrongdoing, which makes your outburst rather odd. Is it the presence of guilt that compels a confession?
But I confess nothing.
Ah, defiant to the very end.
What do you mean?
William and Garnier were too confident, and they paid for this with their lives. I won't make the same mistake. If you truly are a man of God, then surely the Creator will provide for you. Let him stay my hand.
You've gone mad. Will none of you come forward to stop this? He is clearly poisoned by his own fear, compelled to see enemies where none exist.
Seems the people share my concern. What I do for Arcret! Stay vigilant, men. Report any suspicious activity to the guard. I doubt we've seen the last of these assassins.
I think this was this way because the devs wanted to make the players feel like they were part of the scene, since you can move LTR in the crowd during these moments. Instead, it always made me feel like I missed something if I didn't click something fast enough because I set my controller down. Overall, though, I'm really impressed with how well this game is held up on its presentation. I mean, it can't hold a candle to many AAA games today, but it certainly doesn't look bad. When it comes to the story, the original Assassin's Creed brought something different to the table that I think is very easy to take for granted after many years of subsequent AC releases. And that is a clandestine battle between two secret organizations that have been fighting for hundreds of years. Assassin's Creed 1 was the first game to start laying the groundwork when everything was unknown. Even despite rushing through the game the first time I played through it years ago, I remember being highly intrigued by the Assassin versus Templar fight, the use of the Pieces of Eden throughout history, and the eventual discovery of the precursor civilization that came long before humanity. But that is getting way ahead of myself and outside the confines of what this video is about. However, I feel like I probably missed things and underappreciated certain characters because of my haste. So this go around, I wanted to take my time with it and really immerse myself. Putting an obvious disclaimer here, but if you want to experience the story for yourself, then skip ahead to the next section since I'll definitely be getting into spoilers. I'll throw up another warning later as I get to the big reveals, but I figured I'd signpost it here for those who need it. The game starts with the surreal scene of a hooded man in a crowd of faceless people. Disembodied voices are talking, and eventually the player comes to be greeted by the faces of Lucy Stillman and Warren Vidic, both employees of Abstergo. They're conducting experiments on you using the Animus, a device that is used to access memories of your ancestors through your DNA.
Whoa. Where am I?
You're inside the Animus.
Which is...
It's a projector that renders genetic memories in 3 dimensions.
genetic memory.
Seems you'll need a bit of a tutorial. Very well. We'll start simple. What is a memory, Mr. Miles?
It's the recollection of a past event.
Specific to the individual remembering the event.
Yeah, sure.
What if I told you that the human body not only housed an individual's memory, but the memories of his ancestors as well? Genetic memory, if you will. Migration, hibernation, reproduction. How do animals know when and where to go? What to do?
That's just animal instinct.
Now you're arguing semantics, Mr. Miles. Whatever you call it, the fact remains. These creatures hold knowledge absent the requisite first-hand experience. I've spent the past 30 years trying to understand why. I discovered something most fascinating. Our DNA functions as an archive. It contains not only genetic instructions passed down from previous generations, but memories as well. The memories of our ancestors.
And the Animus lets you...
I think starting off in the modern section of the game was a bold move, but also important in establishing the story that this is. Yes, it's about playing an assassin in the Third Crusade, but the larger picture is taking place in the present day. Nowadays, the present day aspect of an Assassin's Creed story is reduced to almost nothing. A me from not too long ago would have been happy with this change, but over the years, and especially after playing Assassin's Creed 1 again, I think it's a shame. In the modern day sections, you play as Desmond, a seemingly innocent bartender, who's been kidnapped because Abstergo needs something from his memories, or his ancestors' memories anyway. These sections are doled out throughout the game, and in them we learn that Desmond was actually raised by assassins, and that Abstergo is just a commercial front for the Templars. Both organizations have been fighting each other this whole time, and it seems that the Templars hold the upper hand. Both hold ideals on how the world should be run and are at odds with one another. However, before I get too far ahead again, I'll simply say that I enjoyed the modern day segments because they really helped to ground the story and increase the intrigue of imagining a secret war spanning throughout history. So, after a brief tutorial, we're placed in control of Altair, an assassin during the time of the Third Crusade, who is currently in Jerusalem on an artifact retrieval mission with his fellow brothers in arms. And immediately within the first few minutes, we see that Altair is a brash and arrogant man who thinks he knows better than anyone else. He disregards and breaks all three tenets of his creed, which are to stay your blade from the flesh of an innocent, hide in plain sight, and never compromise the Brotherhood.
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Understand these words. It matters not how we complete our task, only that it's done.
But this is not the way
My way is better.
This gets him into a bit of trouble with the leader of the assassins, Al-Mualim. After being killed and brought back, wait, what? Altair is stripped of his rank and his weapons and is eventually told to assassinate different individuals who all hold some degree of importance in their respective cities. The first is Tamir, a weapons merchant in Damascus. After his assassination, the other two cities of Jerusalem and Acre open up with their own targets. Throughout these assassinations, Altair learns that there's more to these targets than what can be seen at first glance. Many of them believe they're helping the Holy Land despite having very harsh and controlling methods of doing so. And they all seem to be working together under a greater banner, which you learn to be the Templars.
Let go your burden.
I'll rest now, yes. The endless dream calls to me. But before I close my eyes, I must know what will become of my children.
You mean the people made to suffer your cruel experiments? They'll be free now to return to their homes.
Homes? What homes? The sewers? The brothels? The prisons that we dragged them from?
You took these people against their will.
Yes. What little will there was for them to have. Are you really so naive? Do you appease a crying child simply because he wails? But I want to play with fire, Father. What would you say? As you wish. But then you'd answer for his burn.
These are not children, but men and women full grown.
In body, perhaps, but not in mind. Which is the very damage I sought to repair. I admit, without the piece of Eden, which you stole from us, my progress was slowed. But herbs, mixtures, and extracts, my guards are proof of this. They were madmen before I found and freed them from the prisons of their own minds. And with my death, madmen they will be again.
You truly believe you were helping them?
It's not what I believe. It's what I know.
Altair himself also goes through a transformation during these missions. Of course, he learns a bit of humility, but also what it means to be an assassin and honor the Creed's tenets. Most importantly, he begins to understand his group's mantra of, nothing is true, everything is permitted. Essentially, it's a call to think critically about the world around us. Nothing is true suggests that even absolute truth should be questioned at times and not be taken at face value. And everything is permitted is this allowance that we as individuals can take action to find these truths and ultimately be the deciding factor for the trajectory of our lives.
Before you go, I have a question for you.
Of course.
What is the truth?
We place faith in ourselves. We see the world the way it really is, and hope that one day all mankind might see the same.
What is the world, then?
An illusion. One which we can either submit to, as most do, or transcend.
What is it to transcend?
To recognize nothing is true and everything is permitted. That laws arise not from divinity but reason. I understand now that our creed does not command us to be free. It commands us to be wise.
Do you see now why the Templars are a threat?
Whereas we would dispel the illusion, they would use it to rule.
It's through this understanding that he begins to see the moral grayness with the Templars and even the Assassins. The idea that both organizations want the same thing, essentially peace, but both have different ways to get there. But at the same time, maybe they're not. I mean, after all, the Assassins also want peace, and to achieve that, want people to reach that decision for themselves. However, in order to do so, they have to eliminate certain individuals to push people towards that direction. I think this aspect of Assassin's Creed 1 is done really well. I enjoy moral ambiguity in stories, and it shines here. I loved how many of these antagonists felt like they were doing the right thing within their own mind, similar to how Altair thinks of himself. And here, I'll give one more spoiler warning as I discuss the ending of the game. So one more chance to move on to the next timestamp if you feel that you need it. Anyway, this all comes to a head for Altair when he discovers that the person pulling the strings is none other than his master, Al-Mualim. He believes the people of the Holy Land must be controlled and their minds bent against their will in order to bring about peace. So in this sense, he's basically subscribing to the Templars' ideology, but he's a bit more evil since he just wanted the relic for himself. Well, maybe not as evil as this guy, but
You
still.
kill people simply for believing differently than you.
Of course not. I killed them because I could. Because it was fun.
But how can he do all this with the relic, some of you may be asking? Well, I mentioned the name before, but Al-Mualim is using a piece of Eden. This is a powerful relic that is actually technology from a precursor civilization that existed before the rise of humanity. They can appear as different things and can have different uses in different games. In the original Assassin's Creed, the piece of Eden was a golden spherical ball that could project illusions into the minds of people. Altair is able to beat Al-Mualim by ultimately resisting the attempt to cloud his mind. In doing so, he plans to destroy the piece of Eden, but finds that he can't, and instead a map is revealed showing the locations of many more scattered across the globe. This is what brings the game back to the present because now Abstergo has what they need. They want to dispose of Desmond, but Lucy steps in to save his neck, because, surprise surprise, Lucy is actually an assassin, which she reveals to Desmond a bit earlier.
It's not as bad as it seems.
What are you talking about? They just killed, literally killed, my only chance of getting out of here. And then I find out the assassins are all but destroyed, and Christ, I still don't know what these people are planning. But I do know they plan to kill me when they're done. I am screwed, okay? What do you want me to do?
Just try and have a little faith. Have faith.
It's there where the both of them leave you in the room. Desmond then experiences the ability of eagle vision, which is a unique way of seeing that Altair could use. He could see several cryptic inscriptions written all over the room and in his cell, and then the game ends. At the time of playing this for the first time, I thought this was such a great cliffhanger. What's happening with Desmond? Why can he use eagle vision now? And what's going to happen to him? Is Lucy going to bust him out? And the biggest question, what is all this cryptic stuff written all over the floors and walls? It really intrigued me to want to keep playing, and luckily, since I played the game late, I was able to jump right into the next one immediately after. Overall, Assassin's Creed 1 sets a certain dark and gritty vibe to its world and story that I don't think was ever quite replicated in future Assassin's Creed games. Funny enough, despite many disliking the modern section, I think it's because of the modern sections that the game pulls this feeling off so well. With Altair, the world itself is tense and oppressive since he's a disgraced assassin in a world at war. Everything is shrouded in mystery and confusion, but he's able to try and figure things out. However, with Desmond, he's completely isolated, trapped, and only drip-fed answers, with many of them just leading to more questions. He has no idea what's really happening or what will ultimately happen to him. The gameplay for his side of the story may not be the most exciting, but it certainly does help to set a tone for the narrative. I think for many though, when it comes to trying to play an older game, the deciding factor is whether or not the gameplay holds up. To give my short answer to this, I'd say it does hold up rather well. However, with a slight caveat being your tolerance for playing older games, and whether or not you've played older Assassin's Creed titles before. Although even then, I'd still say the controls felt intuitive enough with minimal jank or rough edges in the moment-to-moment gameplay. Assassin's Creed gameplay can largely be broken down into 3 pillars. First being stealth, and more specifically the concept of social stealth. Second would be the game's amazing movement and parkour system. Finally, the combat of the game for when everything goes to hell in a handbasket, or just when you decide that you're done with trying stealth. The idea of social stealth was that a player would need to blend in with the crowd in order to avoid detection and any unwanted attention. This meant the bustling crowds within the different cities were not merely aesthetic, they function as dynamic obstacles that the player had to navigate. Understanding the behavior of various city dwellers and how to move through them was essential for maintaining a low profile. The sheer density of the population was unprecedented for the time, with only games like Grand Theft Auto coming close from what I can recall. However, even in Grand Theft Auto, the crowds were more of a sandbox element than a core gameplay component. As the narrative progresses, the crowds become more diverse and challenging, with mentally deranged individuals pushing the player, annoying beggars stopping you to ask for coin, and an increased number of guards patrolling the streets, sometimes in small groups. These elements added an extra layer to maneuvering around the city and is something unique to older Assassin's Creed titles. Blending in was crucial in AC1 and many of the earlier Assassin's Creed games. A player could easily alert the guards if they weren't careful, although at times it felt like the guards were overly sensitive. An accidental bump into a pot-carrying civilian could lead to a noisy commotion, attracting unwanted attention and ruining a meticulously planned assassination.
Gets melted by
Or just create a large obstacle of guards that I'd have to fight my way through instead of strolling through the city to the next viewpoint. However, if a player decided to run, then escaping pursuit could be a tense affair. While not overly difficult, it required the player to actively break the line of sight and utilize hiding spots, such as the iconic hay bale, or these, you know what, I have no idea what these things are. Or blend with the crowd, such as hiding amongst a group of scholars, or simply chilling on a bench. This contrasts with modern Assassin's Creed games, where simply running for a short distance is often enough to evade the enemy. Sprinting is always an option to create distance between you and your pursuers. However, in the earlier AC titles, maybe just AC1 since I can't recall the others, a player would need to be careful because colliding with someone would result in a fall. Eventually, the player acquires the ability to tackle people out of the way, but it would require precise timing to avoid losing momentum. The whole idea behind the running and evading, as Jade Raymond explained in one of their demonstration videos, was designed to make the chases feel like a high-speed car chase, but on foot. In that sense, I think they got it right. There's also one very important aspect to Assassin's Creed that essentially affects all of the 3 pillars, but especially stealth, and that is the difference between high and low profile actions. So first, Assassin's Creed controls are actually quite intuitive. When I played the game originally many years ago, I played using mouse and keyboard. It was slightly awkward from what I remember, but not a big issue. This time around, I decided to play the game with a controller, which is essentially what it was built for. The reason for this is because how you control Altair with the different buttons. To make things easy to remember, the 4 action buttons, being Y, X, B, and A on an Xbox controller, were mapped to associated parts of the body. The top action button, or Y, was for the head to activate eagle vision. The left and right, X and B, were used for your offhand and primary hand, which could be for fighting, gently or violently pushing people out of the way, catching a ledge, etc. Finally, the bottom button, or A, was used for your feet, which could be to blend in, walk fast, or break out into a sprint. All of these buttons have multiple actions based on the context and whether or not you're holding down another button to be in high profile, which allows you to do things like assassinating this fool for telling you to get off the roof.
Leave this place!
Obviously, doing things like this can attract more attention to you if you're not careful. These actions also play a role in the parkour system. Sometimes moving faster or slower is necessary to try and make certain jumps, or to decide to simply hang from a ledge or jump off the roof of a building. Because of things being so contextual, if you're anything like me, then you'll probably be making Altair do some weird stuff, or wondering why Altair is doing some of the stuff that he does. It's for this that I think playing older Assassin's Creed titles might be a bit difficult for some. As someone who's played most of the series, I've come to just expect that. If you're someone who's only played AC from Unity onwards, then it might be a little rough going back to the older games. I'll freely admit that I'm not the greatest with this parkour system. In fact, I completely forgot about the catch ledge ability, which admittedly is fairly essential. Still bonking myself over the head for my complete ignorance over this. All that said, it's a good system, and I still found it fun despite thinking that I could never return to the old Assassin's Creed titles because of the so-called jank. Climbing in earlier Assassin's Creed games is also quite a bit different than modern titles. Nowadays, almost anything is climbable in an Assassin's Creed game. It doesn't really matter the surface or if there are any visible handholds. I guess there is some of that for so-called believability, but it's nothing like the earlier games. And what I mean is that in Assassin's Creed 1 and the earlier games in general, every crevice and handhold are things that you could actually grab onto. In fact, you need to grab onto them and in some cases plan out your route while scaling a building. It's almost like a puzzle with some really tall structures because players need to keep an eye out for the approaches up the building. This is something that I sort of miss. I do like the convenience in a modern AC game, but I like the challenge from an early AC game like this one. Climbing in AC1 is also quite a bit slower than later games, so you need to be careful when you're running away from someone. If they manage to toss a rock at you or shoot you with an arrow, then you'll fall. Also, if you need to descend fast, well, the easiest way for me was always just jumping off to get down. Yes, I know the catch ledge option could help with that, so maybe that wasn't quite the easiest way. Personally, I like the changes they made in Assassin's Creed Unity, and would have loved if they kept that as the climbing system since that, to me, was a perfect blend between the old and new Assassin's Creeds as far as climbing is concerned. However, at the time of Assassin's Creed 1, the climbing was a fairly groundbreaking feature and heavily showcased in demonstration videos for the game. And when everything falls through, or you just want to go ham on everyone who gets in your way, then you'll need to rely on combat. I had always remembered the combat being just standing around and using the counter kill incessantly. However, upon returning to the game, well, that wasn't quite the case, especially in the later stages of the game. The combat in Assassin's Creed is actually quite good. Much of it revolves around proper timing with chaining attacks together or blocking when necessary. There are other moves that could break up the momentum of a fight, with some of them unlocking as you continue through the game, such as the grab throw, defense break, and grab break to prevent an enemy from tossing you. Paying attention to things in the fights is also important, such as using the environment to your advantage, or paying attention to the enemies that flinch so you could take advantage of their drop guard. Obviously, things like knowing the grab distance or proper timing of a counter is crucial when fighting. And yes, you do unlock the counter kill fairly early in the game. I still do think that it does make some fights a lot easier. However, I definitely rescind my original thoughts on thinking that you could just cheese fights with it. I mean, you can for the most part, but when fighting many enemies at once, it would take you forever to get through fights if you played that way. It's much better just to learn the timings and incorporate other actions into a fight. Although, when backed into a corner, it's not a bad way to try and get some kills while your synchronization, aka health, recovers. While the later Assassin's Creed games, even as early as the second one in the franchise, features many different weapons and weapon types, the first game has a much smaller arsenal, but still varied in its use. The first of which being the iconic Hidden Blade. Honestly, you don't really use it that much in actual combat since it's meant to be more of a weapon used in stealth. However, if you can master the timings, then you can counter kill with it, which is fun to see at least a few times. The default weapon, and probably the weapon of choice for most, is the longsword, which deals decent damage, but is slower than other alternatives. I could be wrong, but I also felt that the timing window for the counter with this weapon was the easiest to land. Then there's the short sword, which is a faster but weaker version of the longsword, go figure. After using it for a while, I really didn't think its speed made that much difference. Although, it quickly became my go-to weapon because you could also use throwing knives in Altier's offhand. Throwing knives was something that I don't remember using that much the first time I played the game, and I was doing myself a disservice. These knives are powerful because they are essentially one-hit kills for most enemies. With the right skill, you can quickly clear a mob of guards with mainly just throwing knives, which is really satisfying. They're also the one resource that you need to actively resupply, which can be done by pickpocketing thug NPCs. Outside of that, there's no money to purchase weapons or armor, no chests to loot, and no skill points to assign to passive buffs or active abilities. It was a simpler time. Personally, I like some of those additions in later AC games, but I can't deny there is a lot of bloat that probably isn't necessary. Assassin's Creed 1 knew what it was trying to do and made sure to trim any excess fat that might bring down the experience. Now that I finished talking about the 3 pillars of the game, I suppose I should talk about the exploration and the actual process of assassinations. The game is set in the Holy Land, as mentioned, with the gameplay taking place in 3 cities, Jerusalem, Damascus, and Acre, as well as the in-between lands known only as the Kingdom. The Kingdom is something that is inviting at first, but gets stale rather quickly. It's cool because it gives a bigger sense to the world, but as all the action really takes place in the cities, I can't help but feel this area was added solely for the scale, rather than any interesting gameplay. After you roam through it for the mandatory times you need to reach each city for the first time, you'll be happy to use the fast travel option the game gives you to travel to the cities thereafter. Each of the 3 cities, while visually distinct, don't offer much in the way of different gameplay for the most part. I'd say the big departure from this is the dock area in Acre, since you really need to be careful not to fall in the water because, apparently, Altair never attended assassin swimming lessons. Maybe because he lives in a desert. Anyway, players won't have access to the entire city upon first visit, or even second visit, because each assassination mission takes place in one of 3 districts within the city. New ones unlock with new assigned missions. Unfortunately, there's never any overlap in these missions, so once you're done with one district, there is virtually no reason to explore it again unless you're trying to go for 100% completion. Within these cities, you'll primarily be doing investigation missions to gather intel on your mark. However, there are a couple other markers that appear on your map in the form of viewpoints and citizens in need of their friendly neighborhood assassin. Viewpoints, for those who don't know, are basically a staple in Ubisoft game design, and it all started here. The idea is that the player scales a large structure, interacts with it at the top, sees a pretty vista, and then more points are revealed on the map. You don't have to do them all, but I did because I like seeing views. Saving the citizen is a task that is really repetitive. There's only a handful of lines that people will say when save, and it's the same rinse and repeat action. Rush in, kill the guards, and talk with the person. You're rewarded with a group of so-called vigilantes that will try and interfere with any guards trying to give chase to you. If used strategically, you could use the people to your advantage to break a chase. However, I wasn't quite smart enough to plan this out and usually only use them if I chanced running past them. Finally, there was one other side task, which is a collectathon for all the different flags and killing Templar Knights. There are tons scattered throughout all the cities in the Kingdom area, and it's just one big Easter egg hunt for nothing. Yeah, absolutely nothing. At least Assassin's Creed 2 gave you a pitifully short cutscene for finding all the feathers. But here, you get the satisfaction of knowing that you 100%ed the game, assuming you did everything else, and also that you probably need to question your life choices. Okay, so back to the investigations, which is what you really will be doing in the city. There are a variety of different mission types that could be something as simple as sitting near some people talking and eavesdropping, to needing to take out a set of targets in a short time limit. Or collecting flags in a time limit because I have no idea. The other assassins like to mess with Altair, I guess.
Is this the great Altair before me? What an honor. You must be here for a very important mission. Maybe I could help you. I have been eavesdropping and I have learned much. However, I have erred. I had some Masyaf flags to deliver to the bureau leader, but I lost them when attacked by thugs. Could you find them for me? I must be back to my mentor before he returns from the market, so you must be fast as the wind.
These investigations did feel repetitive, but I think they were varied enough that it didn't feel too bad. Additionally, players only need to complete a minimum of 3 to move on to the assassination. However, you could learn actual information relevant to your assassination mission, as well as getting more of the story and lore through reading the information Altair gains from these investigations. I didn't actually know this going into this playthrough, and only found out about it when I was more than halfway through. I came across someone on Reddit talking about how you can go into the menus and find the information that Altair learns through his investigations. So I wanted to see this for myself, and sure enough, there's a ton of little tidbits to be read. It's easily missable, and the game doesn't really highlight this the way games nowadays make things like journal entries, logs, and codex pages easily accessible. These notes can simply be just a note, but also letters, information gained from other assassins, and even maps. As I said, they're not all just lore fluff either, but several of them can actively aid in the player's assassination mission. For instance, one of the assassinations had me targeting Jubair al-Hakim, a scholar who had been bent on burning any books that contradicted the Templars' new vision for the world. However, he and his cronies all dressed very similarly and would disseminate throughout Damascus. Luckily, it was easy to determine who he was and where he would be because of a nifty map and a series of notes that ruled out the locations he wouldn't be at. I wish the game had emphasized the existence of these notes to the player and maybe even pushed into them a bit more. I wonder how different the game might have played if the player needed to rely on the information in those notes. A system like that would have never survived up until the present day iterations of the series, but it would have been interesting to see how it could have been. Once you've investigated to your heart's content, or completed all available investigations, then you're ready for the actual assassination. These set-piece missions are the bread and butter of the game, and what makes the most memorable moments, in any AC game really. Many of the missions require you to stalk your prey and strike when the time is right. While there is no reward for clearing an assassination without alerting guards, it's immensely satisfying when I was able to do so. Some assassinations don't actually have that stalking period and jump straight into a combat or a chase. These ones always felt not quite as rewarding since they don't play into the assassin fantasy, but I did like all of the assassinations for the most part. After each assassination, all guards go on high alert, and even if you don't trigger guards on your tail immediately after the kill, you probably will run into some on your way back to the assassin's headquarters. Lose your tail, or kill all your pursuers, and Altair will be free to rest up and repeat the process again. The last thing I want to point out here is a bit about the ending. No real spoilers of any kind since I already talked about a lot of that in the story section. My issue I wanted to bring up is the game's over-reliance on combat in the final sections of the game. Stealth, one of the biggest core features of the entire game, is completely forgotten in these final sections as it constantly pushes combat to the forefront. I wish they had found a way to preserve this since an assassin getting into a protracted fight was supposed to be something discouraged. Although I realize the writers and designers wanted to make a big spectacle with the climax, so what better way to do that than with a bunch of fighting? Wow, and here we are, finally at my final thoughts. But first, if you're enjoying the video, then I would immensely appreciate you giving the video a like and or leaving a comment. This is shaping up to be the longest video I've ever made, and I put a lot of work into it. I really enjoyed taking this trip into the past and would love to do more nostalgic videos like this in the future, especially if you, the viewer, enjoys them too. Overall, Assassin's Creed 1 holds up for me despite my thinking that there's no way it ever could. I'm not really sure why. Maybe I just needed time away from it in order to fully appreciate what it was. Or maybe there's a part of me that just doesn't really care for all the extra bells and whistles we get in a modern Assassin's Creed game these days. Now don't get me wrong, I like the modern Assassin's Creed games, but I also like the older ones as well. I don't think there's been a single mainline Assassin's Creed game that I didn't like. Except for maybe the first one, but this playthrough has shown me that there's more to it than what I originally thought. I'd say that if you're new to the franchise and don't really play older games in general, then this might feel a bit rough. Otherwise, I think it's fine actually. I still think that some of the later games in the franchise are better, but there wasn't any moment during my time playing where I thought that I wanted to stop. As the first game in the series, it's an obvious no-brainer starting point into Assassin's Creed to see where it all started and step into the game's setting. In fact, the smaller, more focused father of the franchise might be just what a new player needs so they don't get distracted by all the other shiny stuff later games shove in front of the player. And if you're a longtime fan of Assassin's Creed like myself, then I still think the original game merits another playthrough. For some, it's good to play it back and see if those nostalgic memories still hold up, or maybe those glasses you've been wearing are a bit too rose-tinted. Or for people like myself, it gives them another chance to acknowledge the roots of the series and appreciate the game's humble but ambitious origins. If you played Assassin's Creed, then let me know your thoughts or nostalgic memories about it in the comments below. If you haven't, then let me know if my thoughts want to make you try the game, or maybe they actually made you want to stay away. And of course, if you have any questions for me, then leave them down below as well. Once again, I really enjoyed making this video, and I really hope you enjoyed it as well. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.